Good afternoon, everyone. It's 5:30 Mountain Time here in delightful Edmonton, Alberta. 5 above and sunny today. Everything's melting. Absolutely wonderful. Yeah. Yeah. So as a gardening guy, my concern is that everything will melt and there won't be any protective snow cover and my plants will get frost burned and or die. That's not what we're here to talk about today. This is Barry McGuire's Creative Real Estate Education Group. We talk about all things related to creative real estate investing. Today we're going to do some tales from the trenches. And these are all about, well, the first three are about RTO, rent to own. I've got some other ones if we have time, but if we don't have time, we'll get to them another day because I've got about 150 tales from the trenches. So we have a never-ending amount of material to talk about. But today, it's going to be about RTO. We're talking about actual deals. These are case studies. Some were good, some weren't so good, some were great. Because I just want everybody to understand. So we teach a course coming. It's March 6th coming up. We're teaching an all-day course on RTO. But creative strategies, and it doesn't matter which one you apply, they're not all sunlight and roses. I mean, things can go wrong. There are certainly challenges. You have to study hard and learn your chops and get some experience and probably make some mistakes. And, and even when you're experienced, things can happen to you that you don't control. So I never want to, when we're teaching courses or talking about strategies, I never want to leave you with the impression that, if Barry's teaching it, gall darn it, you'll never have a failure. If Donna says it's a good thing to do, well, Donna, you can obviously trust Donna. I mean, if I say it, you got to be careful. But if Donna says it, no, really. All creative strategies have their ups and downs. You have to know that. And we're not trying to say anything other than if you learn the strategies, you'll recognize the opportunities, and the more you do, the better you'll get. So enough of that. So rent to own, a very, very brief recap of what a rent to own is, sometimes called a lease option. A rent to own shows up when someone wants to buy a house, but they can't buy a house, usually because they can't get a mortgage. And they can't get a mortgage for various reasons. Brand new Canadian, new job, divorce, haven't saved their deposit yet and can't do it, credit that needs to be repaired. There are lots and lots of reasons why somebody who wants to buy a property can't get a mortgage. So what you're doing as a rent-to-own investor is you, with your marketing expertise, will bring in potential tenant buyer candidates. You'll run them through your diligence and you'll analyze them. You come up with someone who you think fits your profile, your tenant profile. And if they do fit your tenant profile and check all the boxes, then you might do a deal with that person. So why is rent to own a good creative strategy? Well, I mean, for one thing, if someone is doing a rent to own deal with you, they are doing it because they want to be a homeowner. So they don't think of themselves as tenants. They think of themselves as owners, and therefore your rent to own agreement passes all of the responsibility for all of the operational costs of the house onto them. So all or almost all of the responsibilities go for them. So you're not being called to do any fix-ups, no midnight calls. The tenant's taking on really all of the responsibility for the property. So you don't really have any management issues. And although they're still a tenant, and although they may not complete the deal, because sometimes they don't, they can't cure the problem, whatever it was. Our folks, people who take our courses, have a pretty good success ratio, pretty good conversion ratio. Most of their tenant buyers are actually able to get a mortgage and take out and pay, but some don't. And if they don't, and they're still a tenant, well, there's pride of ownership in that. because they're looking to be an owner, and they take much better care of a property than I think a tenant would. And that protects your investment. It gives you money up front. It gives you cash flow while you're doing the rent-to-own term is going on, usually a 2, 3, 4-year rent-to-own term. You get some mortgage pay down. You should get positive cash flow per month, and you should earn some money on the actual rent-to-own deal itself. So it can be a very lucrative creative strategy. And almost always it's win-win. And in our group we play for win-win. We don't take advantage of people. We don't beat people up. We've got many a rent-to-own tenant who's come to one of our students, said that they need to access the student to buy a property because they can't get a mortgage. On analysis, because these folks really mostly don't know what they're doing, our students go, I think you could get a mortgage. And here's where you could go, and here's why I think you don't need me. And that's foregoing a large chunk of money. But if people have a better way to do it without you, then pass them on. That's karma, folks. It comes back. And rent-to-own can, as well as being a strategy that you just employ on its own, it can also be a great exit strategy for a house that you have and you'd like to get rid of and you'd like to rent-to-own it for various reasons. Or sometimes you can acquire a property through an AFS. That doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense as an AFS, but if you can put the proper rent-to-own tenant in, it can make a whole bunch of sense. So there's way more to talk about on what a rent-to-own is and how it operates and how you market and how you qualify and how you manage the rent-to-own throughout the course of the term. All those things you're going to learn on March the 6th. So I'm not going to go into any more of that now. What I really want to talk about today is some case studies of actual rent-to-own deals. So let's have a look here and see what we got. So our first one is, Wayne. As we go through this, we're going to bring Wayne in, and he is going to, because he knows about rent-to-own, he's going to ask some questions, and he's going to help me with questions that are in the chat that we'll answer as we go along. So Wayne, you can pop in as you want to, and I'll get ready for our first example of a rent-to-own deal.
I'm excited.
Good. You'll like this, Wayne. You'll like this.
Love Tales in the Trenches. Love it.
I tell you, it's a great way to talk about actual deals and things that have happened, because these are all real life stories, folks. I'm not making these up. All right. So here is the rent-to-own setup that an investor is offering to the person who's going to qualify for the mortgage and buy the house. So in this case, our investor can't qualify for any more mortgages. They've got a really good tenant buyer in the wings that they want to do a deal with, but they can't buy the property. So they're talking to someone who can qualify for a mortgage and talking about doing a joint venture with them on this rent-to-own deal. So here's what the investor is saying to the joint venture partner who's going to qualify for the mortgage. So here's what they're saying. Say we're going to buy the property for $475,000. The mortgage is going to be $380,000. So that means a $95,000 down payment that you have to come up with, Mr. Joint Venturer. So that's a 20% down payment. Legal costs, including about a $2,000 mortgage application fee, are coming in at around $3,600 to $3,800. There is an administrative advance of $3,000 going to the investor for things like upfront costs, marketing, travel, tenant referral fees, appraisal fees, tax adjustments, insurance, and those all get returned as part of the initial investment when the deal closes out. But that's some upfront money now. So that is 95 plus about 7, so 102, between 101 and 102 is what our joint venture partner has to come up with. The tenant buyer is coming up with an option, with option money of $23,750, $23,750 on the from the tenant buyer. So what that does is it reduces the money that the joint venture partner has to come up with from 101, 102,000 down to $78,000, roughly 78,000. The predicted price to the tenant is going to be around $527,000. 527. That was the original prediction on it. There's an exercise of option fee. This particular investor in his option agreement says to the tenant buyer, listen, when it's time to exercise the option, you have to come up with an exercise of option fee, because I need to know that you actually have been to your bank and you actually have a fully approved mortgage, and I'm not going to crank up everything on my end only to hear you tell me that, sorry, I didn't get a mortgage. And of course, if you do get your mortgage, then we're going to apply that to the purchase price. But if you don't, I'm keeping it. So at the end of the day, when it's time for the tenant buyer to exercise their option, that original mortgage of $380 is paid down to $363. If the tenant pays $527,000, yeah, that's what happens. That mortgage of $363 is going to get paid off. The joint venture partner is going to get paid back their original $78,000 that they put up. There's about $1,200 worth of legals on the sale of the property. You have to take into account the initial $23,750 option money, because since the tenant buyer is closing, that money gets applied to the purchase price. And the total profit from this is $63,500, roughly. Again, there's a few dollars difference, but I'm just doing round numbers for you. $63,500. There's been, throughout the course of the lease option, there's been lease payments of $64,800. There's been debt service on the mortgage of $37,109, property taxes of $8,000, insurance of $2,400, and the profit from cash flow is about $17,300. So you total up the $63,500 and the $17,300. So the prediction this is at the beginning now. The prediction was that the profit would be about $80,800, which on a per annum basis comes to 51.8% profit on a per annum basis. Now, this is a 50-50 joint venture. So the joint venture partner is going to get about $40,400, and that comes to about 26% ROI per annum to the joint venture partner. Profit on that, the investor's money in was $7,000, and their profit is therefore going to be $33,400. It's $40,400 for each of them. So the investor is going to get paid back or put in $7,000. So $33,390 for the investor. So their profit, their ROI per annum is $238,000, or 238%. Sorry, not 238,000, 238%. So the investor, so this is the pro forma. This is how it's looking at the beginning. And so when you're talking to a joint venture partner and saying, okay, would you like to come in on this deal with me? These are the sorts of things you need to explain to them. And this joint venture partner would have heard that they're going to make about 25% ROI per annum on their investment. And the investor doesn't mind saying, I'm doing all the work and putting it up, and I'm going to do very well out of this myself. So that's how this deal set up originally. So
Pretty decent.
Yeah, a lot of numbers though, huh? A lot of numbers.
I like it, but I like math. So
Yeah, I know. But folks, RTO is about numbers, and I guess the bottom line for me here as I go through these numbers and your head spinning and going, Barry, I can't write it down that fast. The bottom line is that RTOs, especially in a rising market, can be very, very profitable. And as you can see in this pro forma presented to the joint venture partner right at the beginning, I mean, you're saying to your joint venture partner who's putting up the dough, it looks like you're going to do 40% ROI on an annualized basis. If Andrea's listening to this, she's going, Barry, 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 what are you talking about? Don't tell them that much. People won't invest with you. That sounds way too good to be true. And if it sounds too good to be true, then maybe fewer people will invest. But that's the way this one went. That's the way this one was presented. And so it went ahead. This deal went ahead on the basis that I just threw all those numbers at you. But remember, I talked about things don't always go as smoothly as they're supposed to go. So now we're, I think, 3 years later. I can't remember whether this is a 3-year or a 2-year. Nevertheless, it's time for the tenant buyer to buy the property. Time to close out. So they are going off to their bank to get a mortgage. Going off to the bank to get a mortgage. And the bank says, so this is right. This one was, I think, started in 2012 and maybe finished in 2015. So we were booming along and then we dropped here in Alberta. This is an Alberta RTO. And so in the end, the original price to the tenant buyer went to $539 way back when. It got massaged a little bit. But 3 years later, when it was time to exercise and they went to the bank said, so you're paying $539, are you? Our appraisal says this is worth $480. Oops.
womp womp.
Oops. Uh-oh. So you know how it works. When a bank is giving you a mortgage, they look at the offer to purchase price, in this case, the option price of $539, or the appraised value, in this case, $480, and you can guess which one they finance you on. You're right, always the lower of those two values. So the tenant buyer could only get a mortgage for $480,000. But the investor said, well, that's not our deal. Our deal is you're going to pay me $539. And that's what I want. So there was, to cut the long story short, there was a whole bunch of negotiating back and forth. And the tenant buyer said, fine, I will pay you $520. But I can't pay you the full $520 when we close because I only have a basic down payment and I have my mortgage money that I'm going to get, both of which will add up to $480,000.
Yeah.
So what they did was they negotiated that the tenant buyer would pay an extra $1,000 a month for 3 years plus 4 months. So that was the $40,000 missing between sorry, I missed a step there. After negotiation back and forth, the investor said, I'll tell you what, it's not going to be $539. I'll cut the price to $520. I'll cut the price to $520. The tenant buyer said, well, I'm still only getting $480. So there's a gap of $40,000 there between the new negotiated price and what the tenant could get from the bank. So we got a $40,000 gap. They reached an agreement that the tenant buyer would pay $1,000 a month for 40 months. And that took care of the missing $40,000. And I'm happy to report that the tenant, in fact, did pay that extra $40,000.
Really?
The investor took a promissory note as security, didn't register it against the title, didn't register anything else, made an assessment that this was a reliable buyer, and lucky for the investor, it turned out to be a reliable buyer because, really, folks, if the tenant buyer gets in there, gets the house, gets the title in their name, and then goes, I can't pay you, then it's a lawsuit to try and collect. And lawsuits are always difficult. So that was one way to solve a drop in value when it's time to exercise the option.
Mm-hmm.
So Wayne, that's one tale. Any questions out of that?
That's well, nothing in the chat, but I mean, that's a pretty creative way to solve that problem. And to be honest, I'm a little surprised that the tenant buyer accepted it. Most people would be like, whoa, $1,000 a month for 3 years and 4 months. That's a long time. But they obviously had a lot of money invested in that as well. So what's the alternative?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I think a lot of tenant buyers would go, so you want me to pay $520,000 for a house that's only worth $480,000? Is that what you're saying? And I think a lot of tenant buyers would say that, but these folks were really emotionally and structurally and familially invested in this property. They loved this house. They didn't want to leave. They also were kind of reasonable. They didn't think it was fair that the price, which was $539,000, was going down to $520,000. They didn't think that was fair. It was kind of a split the difference negotiation. Yeah. So they're not always like that, folks. This is one way that it got solved. Another way it could have got solved is that the tenant, there might not have been an agreement on how to adjust the price, and the investor could have said, "Well, sorry, if you can't pay the $539,000 that you agreed to pay, or whatever the first price was, then do you want to still be a tenant, or I'm giving you an eviction notice, and I'm keeping your option money." We don't like to operate like that. In our group, we don't like to operate like that. We always want to try and find a win-win solution if we can. Sometimes you can find one, and sometimes you can't. And in this case, that was a pretty good solution.
It's easy to villainize the investor in this tale, but at the end of the day, the option contract is exactly what it is. I mean, the terms were very clear. It's not the investor's fault that the market went down, right? And that is the risk of the tenant buyer. But I'm glad they were able to work it out. It's pretty amazing.
It is pretty amazing. So that was a good story about a deal that was going bad and was saved. So I just say again, all RTO deals don't turn out perfectly, but there's ups and downs. Sometimes they close. Mostly they close if you vet people properly, but there can be wrinkles.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Wayne. Well, let's go on. I know you have a tale to tell us. I'm just going to grab a glass of water while Wayne gets started on how to put two strategies together. And
if you don't mind, I had a question here. What was the built-in appreciation? Do you know?
I don't know what it was. We started out with a price of $475, and I think the option price that got adjusted was $539. So that would be $539 minus $475 over $475 divided by 3, something like that.
What year was it? What year was this in?
2012.
2012?
Yeah.
I'd probably say somewhere around 3%, 2.5%, 3% per year, somewhere along those lines. More than that. It's hard to say. I can't do that kind of math in my head. I'm not that good.
All right, well, let's hear about yours, Wayne.
My tale. Well, you had asked me to discuss, rent to owns with agreement for sale. So I've done a few of these, and I think that rent to owns and agreement for sales are like peanut butter and jelly. I think they work perfectly together. So the reason why, what happened was I found a townhouse on agreement for sale. We negotiated it. Great deal. But the problem was that the total payments, the total expenses every month are sitting around like $1,500 a month. And the market rent for this townhouse is around $1,250. I might have been able to push it to $1,300 if I allowed pets. So, I got this great deal, 0 money down, great terms, great interest rate, but the expenses are too much. It doesn't operate well as a rental property. So that's why we decided to potentially look at rent to own, because as the option credit. So you charge your market rent, but then there's option credits on top of that. So if we were able to charge enough option credits, that would actually offset the negative cash flow and create a cash flowing property. So that's actually what we did. We got it, we renovated it, and then we started advertising for a rent to own tenant buyer. And we found a really nice young woman who, I mean, just like textbook perfect rent to own tenant buyer. Like, she had her life in order. She just fell on, during when she was in school, student loans really started stacking up. She fell behind. She took someone's advice, you should do a consumer proposal and consolidate your debts. And then ultimately she didn't really realize it was going to affect her credit. So, that stuff stays on your record for some time. And she had completed it all. It had been years since it had all been done, but it's still going to stay on her record for. So she just needed a little bit of time before it was removed off of her record, and then she could build up her credit. But she has an amazing job. She's making like $50 an hour working for the school board as a speech therapist, something along those lines. Just a really great woman. Just made one bad decision, and again, I mean, we'll kind of get into more of this, at the rent to own course. But when I'm looking for tenants, I'm looking for tenant buyers. Sorry, I'm looking for tenant buyers that something's happened to them, not something that they've done, right? And she's a perfect example of that. Just a terrific tenant buyer. So qualified her, everything was great. And then so what she ended up doing was she paid market rent, which was $1,250 a month, and then she also paid an additional $350 a month towards her option credit, which brought a total payment of $1,600. My underlying expenses are $1,500, which creates $100 of cash flow a month now. So now it just turned it from a negative cash flow property to $100 positive cash flow. And it's also amazing because I don't have to worry, as you mentioned earlier, I don't have to worry about maintenance. I don't have to worry about repairs. She takes care of all that stuff. And she's not moving frequently because she's going to be buying it. So I don't have any vacancies either.
Yeah, that, it's a couple of points here to emphasize, folks. When you have the right tenant, when you found a tenant that something has happened to them, not they've been silly somehow, that's a way better tenant to have than where somebody comes up who looks like they might be a decent vet, but it's their habits, their bad habits that have to be corrected. Habits are tough to correct. They're very tough to correct.
You know what though, Barry? This is Tales from the Trenches. This tale isn't quite done.
Okay.
I didn't tell you about this, but actually it went bad.
What?
This perfect deal, everything's fantastic. It actually went bad. And I mean, that's what happens in the trenches. Like you lay out the best plan and then things happen. So, she ended up moving in and everything was fantastic. Great. She loved it. Her dogs loved it. She did a bunch of work. She landscaped the backyard, put all new sod down there for her dogs, and she really enjoyed it. And then eventually she called us up and said, I love having you guys as landlords. I've loved this whole process, but the truth is that I changed my mind and I really don't like this place. She has some bad hip issues, so the stairs were becoming an issue for her. And also the neighborhood, I guess some things that kind of happened in the area and she was a little uncomfortable about it. So, she didn't like the neighborhood and she couldn't handle the stairs. So she wants to get into something that doesn't have any stairs. So she was super sweet about it. And she completely understood that I know my deposit is not refundable. I know that my option credits are not refundable. What can we do here? So we had a call and we worked it out, and she agreed. So she opted to cancel her option, but she wanted to stay until we can find a suitable replacement. She didn't want to leave us hanging. So she's staying. We canceled her option and we revised her contract to $1,500 a month in rent so that we didn't lose any money. So now she's paying $1,500. She had somebody else move in to kind of help out. And now she's been renting there for, I think it's about 6 to 8 months now. What we're going to try and do, everything going on with COVID, it wasn't great timing, especially for us. So she was totally understanding of that. She's going to wait till we find a replacement, but also we're working with her to find her somewhere else to move into. And what we've agreed is that we would actually take her deposit money and her option money and transfer that over to another property. So we're not losing any money. She's not losing any money, and we're just going to work with her. But everything worked out great. We had a great relationship. And yeah, I mean, good, bad, good. It's all working out. And yeah, we're pretty happy about it.
So that's such a great story, Wayne. I mean, it's a great story because it emphasizes how if you're really looking to help people and if you're playing for win-win, you can almost always and both sides have to be doing this.
Yes.
You can almost always work something out. So that's a good illustration of that. I think it also shows up in that at the beginning when you analyzed her, she was checking all the boxes in terms of was she a good potential tenant buyer.
Absolutely. If you're going to be doing this is a long-term relationship, right? This is going to be someone you'll be dealing with for some time. So yeah, we spent a lot of time, searching her out. It was a needle in the haystack, but it really worked out. And I give her a lot of credit because this could have gone completely differently had she been, not taking it so well and had not been so open to win-win. It was all her. She came to us and she offered, to work with us, and I really admire that because ultimately at the end of the day, because of the way that she did that, it made us happy about the situation and willing to work with her. Had she come to us and started throwing stuff at us and cursing and swearing and saying, I'm calling my lawyer, then it would have been completely different. I don't think we would have been as willing to, work with her. But because she was so, open to the win-win, and that's why we're open to, taking her deposit money and transferring it over to another property and working with her.
A couple of other things come out of this, I think. The first thing is that you're doing this in Alberta where you're able to acquire property by an agreement for sale, by an AFS, for not much money, maybe no money, little or no money down because of the Alberta market being flat to negative. And I know that doesn't apply in other parts of the country, but some of the principles are still the same, especially on how getting a good tenant buyer to start with is very, 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 very helpful. And the other part, I think, is that this is a property first rent to own as opposed to a tenant first rent to own. When it's the tenant first rent to own, you find the qualified tenant and then you go find their dream home. With the property first rent to own, you have a property you have to deal something with and you go find a tenant buyer who wants to go in it. So for this tenant buyer, she thought this was going to be, the best property, but if it had been a different circumstance where she was a great candidate, you might have gone and found one where she would have said, I've been having troubles with my hips lately, so I think a bungalow is better than a two-story for me.
Yeah.
But that's the way it is. I mean, it's the exit you needed out of an agreement for sale deal that was negative cash flow. So all in all, that's a win-win. Works better in Alberta than other provinces. So good job. Well, so we've had a couple of tales that haven't gone exactly how we thought they'd work at the beginning, but they both worked out. And I guess one other advantage, folks, I want you to know that when you take one of our courses, you end up being an ongoing student, get to join our student group, which is exclusive to people who have taken courses. And then when you have a problem, say Wayne had this problem where his tenant buyer comes to him and says, gee, sorry, I actually don't want this place. Wayne gets on the group and says, okay, here's what happened. What do I do? And he would have had coaching from any number of students to give him lots of ideas about what to do in his bad situation. So that's a thing to remember is you get ongoing interested people who have experience who will help you through your difficulties as a graduate, as someone who's taken one of our courses. All right, enough of that self-promotion. Let's get on to
how about I do it? Like I have tapped into that support group so many times. It's extremely supportive.
Yeah.
And yeah, you go to some courses and then that's it. You taking the course, you got the binder, that's all you have, but you don't get to go and ask more questions. So yeah, you're allowed to gloat.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it is. And the other thing is, you don't have to wait days, do you? I mean, you tap your question in, and people are tapping back at you like right away. You're pinged immediately. So, yeah, I mean, it's a good, knowledgeable group. I mean, we've got about 400 people who've done lots of deals. So that's a big body of folks who want to help you. So think about that. All right, let's get on to our third tale here. And I'm just going to get my paperwork organized. So this is another circumstance where the investor is looking for a joint venture partner because he runs a rent-to-own business, but he can't qualify for any more mortgages. So when he has a tenant buyer, he can't buy the property because he can't qualify for a mortgage himself anymore. He's got enough property. So this is kind of the pro forma that he put out to his network of people, his group of people who said, yeah, if you come up with any kind of a creative deal where you need money, yeah, I want to be on the list. Send it to me. So this is what he sent out to his group, full of numbers again. Sorry, it's a numbers game. We have to talk about numbers to have this make sense. So let's talk about some numbers. All right. So the property is going to, let's see, found the qualified tenant buyer. The tenant buyer found a property appraised value of about $375,000. An 80% mortgage is $300,000. The down payment is $75,000 plus some legals of $1,500. So the joint venture partner has to come up with $76,500, which is about 20.4% of the purchase price. Now the sale price was predicated on 5.5% appreciation rate, which meant that the buyer was going to end up paying $417,000, and I believe it was over 2 years. I think this was a shorty at 2 years. So at the end of 2 years, the remaining mortgage started out at $300,000. The mortgage was down to $290,000. So it didn't get paid down too much, but $10,000. So we're selling for $417,300. We're paying out the mortgage of $290,000. We're paying back the joint venture partner $76,500. We took off the initial option money of $20,000. This tenant buyer had $20,000 to put up. The tenant buyer also put up $600 a month in option money, extra option credits. So that was $14,400 that had to be taken into account. The total profit was $16,614 just on the sale side of things over, I believe, 2 years. Then when we go down to monthly cash flow, we had some cash flow we had the lease payments of $72,000 over the 2 years. We had the initial option fee of $20,000. Servicing the debt was $27,600. Property taxes were $8,200. Insurance was $2,100. So the profit from cash flow was $53,000. So what does that work out to? What does that work out to? At the end of the day, for the adjusted initial investment, remember the tenant, the joint venture partner was going to put up $76,500 because of the money the tenant buyer put up. Their adjusted investment was $67,500, and the return on investment, the annual return on investment, was at the beginning predicted to be 23.5% for that JV partner. 23.5%. So it's actually kind of similar to the first one that we did, where the predicted ROI for the joint venture partner was 25%. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, what you can see out of this is that again, rent to own can, in an appreciating market where you get to where you get to factor in an appreciation number into the deal, it can be quite a lucrative investment. Yes, it works in flat to negative markets, but it works best in appreciating markets. So that was what the investor said to the joint venture partner. At the end of the day, in a couple of years, I think your ROI, your return on investment, on an annualized basis is going to be 23.5%. And that's how the deal got signed. So I don't have the final numbers, but I was privileged to receive from the investor. He said to me, Barry, do you want to see what my reports to the joint venture partner look like? I said, sure. So he sent one along to me. Let's see. With this report, I'm pleased to include your 10th quarterly cash flow distribution check of $2,250. We purchased 28 months ago. The investment is going well. Our client is working with his mortgage broker, hopes to complete in a couple of months. He's got a little bit of trouble. There's a judgment filed against him that's on his credit report, which is affecting his credit rating. So we're going to complete the purchase in his wife's name only, and husband will continue to repair his credit with the assistance of our mortgage team, which will continue beyond our involvement with the client and the property. So far, we've received a whopping $109,400 in cash payments over the last 28 months. That's 29.41% of our $372,000 purchase price. So I see that the price was $372, not $375 in the pro forma. Total disbursements paid out to date, $26.2, which is a 34.58 cash-on-cash return on your original investment of $76,000. Not bad. 34.5% cash-on-cash return on the initial 76 grand. If we include your portion of mortgage paydown and reserve fund, your total cash-on-cash return is 44%. Annualized, you're 17% per annum, without consideration of any appreciation of the market value since we acquired 2.5 years ago. I guess we're a 3-year, not a 2-year one. So that is what these reports look like. And in the end, this deal closed out for pretty close to what the pro forma said. I think instead of 23%, it was about 20.2%. But the joint venture partner shrugged his shoulders and goes, okay, so I thought I was getting 23.5. I got 20.2. Boo-hoo. I'm sure unhappy about that.
Yeah.
So this is one that worked out just the way it was supposed to work out. It's a beautiful house. The tenant buyer and his wife and a couple of kids are happy as clams. The joint venture partner is happy. The investor's happy. And that's a classic good vibe. It all went the way it was supposed to. RTO tail. So happy about that one. It's a good one to finish on.
It's a nice story.
Yeah, good story on that one. All right.
There's so many bad stories around rent-to-own, and everybody thinks it's bad because it's only the bad ones that get told, and the good ones never get told.
Yeah, everybody's got a bad story, at least apocryphally or anecdotally. They go, yeah, I heard of someone who did this and did that, and guy stole all his money, and then he did it to somebody else. And the classic rent to fail is what we mostly hear about.
Yeah.
I wonder why we don't hear more about the successes.
Good doesn't sell. Never has.
I guess not. Although I'm guessing that people who do this as a business, I don't know if we're talking Neil and Rachel Oliver, who are going to help us on March 6th, I'm pretty sure they use their success stories to help with their business, because it is a business. That's what they do, is they find these deals, they set up these deals, they manage these deals. Some they do on their own, some they get joint venture partners involved. And it's always not easy. It's easier to let a successful joint venture partner say, well, this is how this deal worked out for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's very convincing for someone who's going, what about this rent-to-own? Should I get involved in it? I mean, can you really make some money on it, or does it really work out? I mean, I thought people could never close these deals. And not to say it's easy. I mean, there's lots to do. It's a lot of work to market and find the right tenant buyer. Now, Wayne, you've been at this for on the creative side about 5 years. What have you learned about qualifying those tenant buyers from when you started to say what you know now? How's it changed for you over 5 years?
Yeah, it's not just about the numbers and the papers and we talked about this on a previous segment, on a previous live. It's all about character for me. Like, I'm really looking for a very specific person, because I have to ensure that they're actually going to do what they're supposed to do. Doesn't matter. They could have, they could be right in line with the credit score, and they can have, the savings and the, no debts. But even the, if they only have to do a small or a couple little things in order to qualify for mortgage, they have to do those things. So I've narrowed in on exactly who I am looking for, and that's not just rent to own tenant, but that's also regular tenants. I know exactly who I'm looking for because I want to set things up for success. Yeah, I'm really good at judging character now.
Well, that's a great character trait to have of your own. To have you've looked at all the numbers, you've gathered all the details, you've done all the diligence, and then some people say it's gut feeling, and for you, you're judging character. So I'm not sure if those are the two.
My contract is just a piece of paper, Barry. Just a piece of paper.
Yeah.
People have to do what they're supposed to do on it, and that's lease agreements, option contracts, agreement for sale contracts, across the board.
I was talking to a client today who has been trying to build his dream home for 3 or 4 years, and he got started with one contractor who seemed to be saying the right thing. The contract was big and thick and seemed to be okay. Mm-hmm. But once they got started and actually got into it, the contractor really started to try and beat him up. Well, there's extras here. There's a problem there. He wants to bill more and do more. And he punted that guy, and he goes, I'm going to have more protection in my contract next time. And so he found another contractor, and he kind of went down that same path again. Mm-hmm. Where there was a big, thick contract, and he got his lawyer to vet it. And he lives in another town. He's my pal, and he calls me up to get free legal advice, which is perfectly fine. And so when I was talking to him today, he believes he now has the right contractor to do the job. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, you've been through this before. You had big, thick, what you thought were solid contracts. What have you learned out of all of this? He goes, it's not about the paper. Not about the paper. Yes, you have to have paper for sure. We're not saying to people, you don't need paper. You absolutely do need paper. But it's a framework for your deal. If you ever go to court, you need paper because that's what the court looks like. They don't like he said, she said. They want to look at paper. Yeah. But in terms of having it go the way it's supposed to go without having to enforce things, it's all about character. So have all the paper you want. If you don't have a good feeling, if you're not a good judge of character, and if you are, and that little character judging facility that you have is saying to you, I don't know, and probably the answer is no. So that's an important part.
Don't do it. Yeah. I'm really, really looking forward to hearing how Neil and Rachel, qualify and their tenant buyers. I'm sure they've got some really cool tricks, considering how many they've done, right?
Yes, over 4. I think they're north of 425 now. That's a lot
that they have. My God. Yeah.
So I know it's changed for them drastically from when they started 11 years ago. They were babes in the woods, brand new, had their own ideas, came from big public companies. They both had high-paying jobs at big public companies who go at things differently. It's far more policy-driven, far more sliced and diced, far more relying on paper. And I think they got I think they got their butts kicked a few times at the beginning, as we all do. As
Yeah.
we all do. Let's face it. Until they, took a step back and talked to other people in the RTO field, and I think they started to let their own natural character show through. They are by nature helping people. They want to help. They want to be problem solvers just because of who they are naturally, and they decided to apply a bunch of that to their RTO business. But they had a few bumps along the way, for sure.
We
All right.
we got a question here from Ray. He asked, how do you deal with tenant buyer with pets, specifically dogs? Do you add extra conditions?
I've never talked to any of my clients about whether or not, when you're just renting to someone, the pet question is a question for sure.
Mhm.
What about you, Wayne? Do you worry about? I mean, I remember in your story about the young lady with the townhouse, she had pets.
Mhm.
So, what's your take on pets and RTO?
I think that it's hard enough to find a tenant buyer with property first as is. And if you're going to narrow it down even more and say that you can't have pets, I mean, you're going to have no luck whatsoever. It's the same conditions as with a normal rental. You have your pet addendum, because this rent to own is a lease option with an option, right? So it's the same thing. You put the applicable dog conditions in your lease. I wouldn't charge a pet fee, because pet fees and deductibles are for, extra wear and tear, or, potential extra cleaning at the end, which doesn't apply to this because they're theoretically going to be buying this.
Yes.
So you don't need to add those. In the event that something was to happen and they did not exercise their option, things went poorly, you still have a damage deposit, you still have the other deposits. So as far as a risk goes, it's pretty low that, they're going to leave the place trashed and you're not going to have any money for dog repairs. So pretty straightforward, pretty standard.
Pretty standard. And so you've been looking at that from how we're having to deal with things in Alberta, which is, property first and basically as is to some extent. But even if you're in a province, you're in Ontario or BC or places where property is really popping along, the Maritimes are popping along, going like crazy. And you've got lots of candidates. If you've got lots of candidates for your rent to own program, and if you've got good appreciation factors built in, you might try to do something on the pet side of it, but I would say don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I mean, you just pick a great tenant who's going to give you a big chunk of option money, pay nice, healthy option payments every month. Looks like they're going to qualify, and you get them in there without worrying about a pet. That's what I would say. Andrew says, I think pets, especially bigger dogs, are a huge driver for tenant buyers who can't find rentals. Yes, Andrew, you're right. They love their dogs, as we love our pets, all of us do. And it's heartbreaking when it's no, 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 no. You got a big dog? No, no, and no. So yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say we do have one other question. Did I cut you off?
Okay.
What would the tenant buyer's legal position be? This was from earlier when you were discussing your first tale. Could the tenant buyer renegotiate the price if they realized the market was going down?
Well, you start from the contract, George. That's a really good question. You start from the contract. That's the option. The option contract says that the buyer has the right to buy the property for a price in a certain period of time. There's lots more in an option contract. That's the nuts and bolts of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the right to buy a property for a fixed price within a fixed period of time. So if it comes to the end of the option and it's time to exercise or not, and the house is worth less, that is not really a factor. The contract says otherwise. You can buy it for this amount of money. It doesn't say you can buy it for the option price plus the current or less $40,000, because that brings us down to the current appraised value. So the tenant buyer normally has no right to pay anything other than the option price. Now, that's what I see normally. But maybe in a fluctuating market, the parties might agree to some sort of an adjustment. So in our example, I think what happened was the tenant buyer agreed to pay half of the price drop from what they originally agreed to pay to what the appraised value was now. They agreed to kind of split that difference. So that was a negotiated way out of a dropped value. The other thing that you can do in rent to own is agree that the final price is the classic one. The final price is the average of two appraisals. So you get two appraisers when it's time to exercise. They give the two prices. You take the average of those two prices, and that's what the tenant buyer has to pay.
It's pretty fair.
Obviously, it's fair, but the big hole in there is that if the property has dropped a whole bunch in value, then you as the investor seller are going to lose on that property.
Yeah.
You're not going to make certainly as much money on that property. I guess the downside for you as the investor, if the value has gone way up, is that you're going to get more money. So I mean, the knife cuts both ways when you agree that the final price will be based on an appraisal and not on a fixed appreciation factor built into the option. Yeah. So you're right. It's fair. Somebody isn't going to like it probably, but it's fair.
Yeah.
So there you go. There's three tales from the trenches on three different kinds of options. Rent to own. Sorry, three different kinds of rent to own deals. Those are all real deals, folks. Those are real numbers, real people, and they all finished up just the way we said. So rent to own is really a great strategy. It's we're rehabilitating the reputation of rent to own one deal at a time. I think all of us should be a little more vocal about why we think it can be a great deal, and I never let it pass by me when somebody starts dissing the rent to own strategy. And people do it. Everybody has an opinion. They're all experts. If it comes by me, I go, so what is it you do for a living? Oh, I see. You're a something or other. So have you ever done a rent to own? Oh, you haven't? Well, how do you know about this? And anyway, it's an easy conversation to have when you're a fan of rent to own like I am. And most people end up going, gee, I never knew that. Boy, I'm glad I talked to you. I actually have a friend who needs to get a property and he can't. Now I could say to him, and do you know anybody who does rent to own? So, I think we're rehabilitating rent to own. It can be a great strategy to exit a property that you just don't want anymore or that doesn't fit for you anymore. It can be certainly a great strategy in an appreciating market to make a really good return on your investment, both for you and for a joint venture partner if you need one. It's a good way to fit a couple of strategies together.
Yeah.
So that's it. Those are the tales from the trenches on rent to own tonight, folks. So I reckon we're going to sign off. Hope anybody who wants to learn about rent to own shows up for March 6th. Wayne, what do you think?
That's a week away. I looked at your calendar. Holy crap, that's a week away.
A week away, yeah. Donna and I are working feverishly away. Of course, she's way farther ahead on her end than I am. That's the kind of girl she is.
I heard there's a lot of people signed up for it. Done really well.
We have quite a few people signed up for it. Actually, quite a few early. Often people sign up for things at the last minute, and I'm sure lots of people are still going to sign up at the last minute. But there's been a great deal of interest ahead of time, which is gratifying for Donna and I because you always wonder, is anybody going to show up on March the 6th? We're just going to be flapping our gums to the ether and nobody there. But no, there's going to be lots of people. It's going to be a great focus team. Yeah, it's more than just Neil and Rachel. It's Wayne and Andrea and Neil, maybe Sean, Deb Kennedy might show up. Donna's nodding her head. I know everybody who's going to be there. Lots of questions to be answered. It'll be worthwhile, folks. So on that self-promotional note, good night, everybody.
Good night.